Hello, all you freedom-loving people. Welcome to another episode of Front Page. I'm your host, Scott Cameron Goulet. Governor Ron DeSantis announced that he will petition the state Supreme Court to impanel a grand jury to investigate COVID vaccine wrongdoings. This comes at the same time as Republicans pushing Congress to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. And in Europe, the EU embargo on Russian seaborne oil imports came into effect, and of course the Russians didn't sit back, rather they showed their sense of humor. Meanwhile, in other breaking news, 4 people, including the European Parliament Vice President, have been charged with money laundering, corruption, and participating in a criminal organization. Okay, let's get into it. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announced on December 13th that he will petition the state Supreme Court to impanel a grand jury to investigate any and all wrongdoings in Florida with respect to the COVID-19 vaccines. DeSantis announced the decision while hosting a roundtable on the reported side effects of coronavirus vaccines with the Florida Surgeon General Dr. Joseph Ladapo and with a panel of scientists and physicians. He said, in Florida, it is against the law to mislead and to misrepresent, particularly when you're talking about the efficacy of a drug. He added, we'll be able to get more information and bring more accountability to those who committed this misconduct. The meeting discussed the research that they had conducted and the marginalization that they faced as their questions and their data were ignored. During the discussion, 2 victims also described serious side effects from the mRNA vaccines. The experts who joined DeSantis will now constitute the state's Public Health Integrity Committee. During this pandemic, DeSantis has distanced Florida from the mask mandates, lockdowns, and other prevention measures that have affected the lives of millions of Americans in other states. The governor discussed how the public health establishment had totally squandered any type of confidence or goodwill people would have. DeSantis said, our CDC, Center for Disease Control and Prevention, at this point, you assume that anything they put out is not worth the paper it's printed on. They're not serving a useful function. According to DeSantis, the new committee can counteract nonsense when it comes out of these institutions. He said they're not just going to go with the flow and follow pre-cooked narratives, but will actually do evidence-based analysis. Republicans, again, are pushing Congress to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. On Tuesday, 20 Republicans, led by GOP Representative Andy Biggs of Arizona, demanded that the House move to impeach Mayorkas in the next Congress. This shows that border issues will play a major part of the Republican oversight agenda next year. The lawmakers accused Mayorkas of not taking seriously the migrant crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border. Andy Biggs said, Secretary Mayorkas has released more than 1 million illegal aliens into the country. He added, most of these released illegal aliens will never be heard from again. Representative Lauren Boebert also accused Mayorkas of misleading Congress by testifying under oath that the U.S. southern border was operationally under control. Boebert said he regularly lies to the American people, claiming that the southern border is closed. She added, I've been there. It's wide open. In spite of these pushes for Mayorkas' removal, impeachment is a long shot. In order to impeach a federal official, the House must first pass a resolution with a simple majority. After the House votes, the Senate sits in trial, and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court also presides. After that, the Senate votes on whether or not to convict or to acquit the individual. 2/3 of the Senate, which is 67 votes if they're all present, is needed to convict. Democrats will hold 51 seats in the Senate next year. This makes it impossible to convict Mayorkas or anyone else without the help of 16 Democrats. However, Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee are planning to conduct a thorough investigation into the border crisis, some of whom hope that it will be the first step towards impeachment. Last week, Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro spoke to the protesters at the Alvorada Palace in Brasilia for the first time since mass protests began 44 days ago. He promised to fight to the death for Brazil. Bolsonaro said, "I am here to listen to the people. My loyalty belongs to the people of Brazil. The people are once again waving their flag proudly and have hope for their country's future. Now we must unite." He added, "I am the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The armed forces are the last bastion against communism. They are loyal to the Brazilian people. Their duty is to defend our freedom. We are facing difficult and painful decisions. If it goes wrong, it's because we as leaders have failed. So do not criticize without being absolutely sure of what is happening. Nothing is lost yet. I believe that victory will come within the law and the Constitution." Currently, Brazil is bracing for a confrontation between its pro-Lula Supreme Court and its pro-Bolsonaro military. Last week, Lula da Silva announced his first cabinet, including Fernando Haddad as finance minister. He previously led a crash in Brazilian markets and currencies. A prospective minister of defense has announced that he will purge the military of its patriots. He called it depoliticization. This will further increase the pressure on the military commanders to act. Recently, the pro-Lula Chief Justice imposed fines on protesters and seized 177 trucks for participating in the blockades. He fined their owners about $19,000. The judge also ordered the removal of the mayor of Tapura for supporting the protests. Matt Tierman, who is a Brazil observer, told Steve Bannon on the War Room certain generals said, "Load up on cash, food, and gas," and people are doing that. After seeing the tanks and APCs all over the country, including the firefights in the favelas with Venezuelan paramilitary groups, the website for the Army Reserve expansion crashed. Everybody's trying to get into the reserves and fight. I certainly think something is happening. The EU embargo on Russian seaborne oil imports came into effect last week. The EU has set a price cap of $60 per barrel for Moscow crude oil in hopes of limiting Russia's energy reserves. Russian President Vladimir Putin said that revenues will not be affected by the price cap. The Russians also showed their sense of humor. The Russians have released an advertising video. It starts in a car park in Europe in 2023. A middle-aged office worker is carrying a briefcase after work, and he walks to his car. Strangely enough, his limousine is filled with dry straw. He turns on the car ignition, and the fuel gauge points to empty. Next, he begins a magical operation. He opens the sunroof of the car and sticks his head out. The car begins to move slowly, then the camera slowly pulls away, and then it turns out that a horse is dragging the car forward. No wonder the car is so full of dry straw. That's for the horse to eat. The ad reminds viewers, "Dear Europeans, switch to alternative modes of transport because soon petrol will be too expensive." The advertisement comes amid a heated exchange between the EU and Russia over oil and gas prices. Putin said that Russia would consider cutting oil production in retaliation for price caps set by the G7 and the EU. According to Reuters, Putin said that it would be stupid for the West to impose price caps. He also warned that energy prices in any country involved in the price caps would rise. Meanwhile, Russia seeks to enhance trade with India in order to overcome the impact of the oil price caps. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, India has become a large buyer of Russian oil. India may have been helpful to Russia, but the Chinese Communist Party gave Putin a head start when the leaders of Saudi Arabia and the Chinese Communist Party met in Riyadh on the 9th and signed major energy deals. Saudi Arabia is China's top oil supplier, and China is its biggest oil consumer. China imported $43.9 billion of Saudi crude in 2021. Under normal circumstances, OPEC countries such as Russia and Saudi Arabia agree on oil issues, and they stick together against the US and Canada. Since the outbreak of the war, China has become Russia's largest oil customer. Xi Jinping was well received by the Saudis. The Saudi Air Force sent 4 jet fighters to escort Xi's plane When the plane landed, it was accompanied by 6 Saudi jets trailing colored smoke and with a 21-gun salute at the airport, to name just a few. It was a stark contrast to the cold reception that Biden received during his visit to Saudi Arabia in the summer. Clearly, the Saudis are trying to win back China as a big customer. Xi Jinping was also clearly pleased with the outcome of the visit, describing it as a groundbreaking trip. This, of course, worries Putin a little. Russia's media, Vedomosti, on Tuesday noted that Putin and Xi Jinping will meet in late December in order to discuss the 2022 big events. Vedomosti quoted sources as saying that the meeting was unlikely to be face-to-face. The details are being worked out, the source said. And in other breaking news regarding the EU, 4 people have been charged with money laundering, corruption, and participating in a criminal organization. This followed an investigation by Belgian prosecutors into allegations that the World Cup host tried to influence the European Union's parliament with money and gifts. However, Qatar's foreign ministry denied any involvement by the country in a tweet on December 11th. They said that it rejects any attempts to associate it with accusations of misconduct. Authorities refused to reveal the identity of those who were detained during the weekend raids, but according to the local news media, European Parliament Vice President Eva Kaili, who is a member of the Greek Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats, has said to be among those detained and charged. Despite profound international concerns about conditions for stadium construction workers who built the stadiums in Qatar for the World Cup, she has emerged as one of the most vocal defenders of Qatar as vice president. She was in charge of Middle East responsibilities, and she recently called Qatar a front runner in labor rights. Previously, Kaili also claimed that her grandfather had been assassinated by communists, which turned out to be completely false, but she was never held to account for this by the Greek media, nor has she ever apologized. Following her arrest on Friday, her responsibilities as vice president were suspended, and she was expelled from both the Social Democrat Party in Greece and from the Socialist and Democrat group in the European Parliament. Kaili's partner, Francesco Giorgi, is also among the 4 charged. Giorgi is a parliamentary assistant to another MEP, and he is the founder of the nonprofit organization called Fight Impunity. Nobody could have foreseen this fall to happen to perhaps one of the most glamorous couples in the European Parliament who were at the peak of their careers. Pier Antonio Panzeri, the former Italian MEP and the president of Fight Impunity, has also been charged in the case. An unnamed lobbyist was also charged. The 4 will remain in custody. According to reports, Panzeri's wife and daughter were also arrested by Italian police during the investigation on Friday. Investigators in Brussels suspect that Qatar used money and gifts to influence economic and political decisions in the European Parliament. The European Parliament and its president say that they stand firmly against corruption, and they are actively cooperating with law enforcement and judicial authorities in order to assist the course of justice. Following the death of the Iranian woman Mahsa Amini from injuries sustained by the regime's morality police, Iran has been engulfed by massive protests. And now, the Iranian News Wire reported the names of 28 Iranians who were sentenced to death for participating in anti-regime protests. Last week, Mohsen Shikari was the first person to be executed. Many Iranians who were enraged by the execution of the 23-year-old Mohsen Shikari held protests in many cities in Iran. On December 12th, the execution of Majid Reza Rahnavard also caused a wave of anger among the people in Iran and abroad. Rahnavard was one of the detainees of the recent protests in Iran. He was executed after only 3 weeks had passed since his arrest. Iran's judiciary claims that Rahnavard attacked several protectors of security and he stabbed 2 of them to death. Some people, however, have claimed on social media that he took part in several protests and he had used a knife to defend his younger sister, who was being harassed for her not proper hijab by several plainclothes policemen who were on the street near his home on the day of the incident. Amnesty International has said that Iranian authorities are seeking the death penalty for at least 21 people in what it called sham trials designed to intimidate those participating in the popular uprising that has rocked Iran since September and to deter others from joining the movement. Included in the list of impending executions is Iranian soccer player Amir Nasser Azadani, who is accused of waging war against God. The worldwide representative organization for professional footballers posted a tweet saying that FIF Pro is shocked and sickened by reports that professional footballer Amir Nasser Azadani faces execution in Iran after campaigning for women's rights and basic freedom in his country. We stand in solidarity with Amir and call for the immediate removal of his punishment. The U.S. also condemned the execution of Ranavard amidst the ongoing protests. State Department spokesman Ned Price told reporters at a briefing, "We denounce this draconian treatment in the strongest terms. These harsh sentences, and now the first public execution, are meant to intimidate Iran's people. They're meant to suppress dissent." And in World Cup soccer, Argentina beat Croatia 3-0 in the first semifinal of the Qatar World Cup on December 13th. Argentina takes the lead to the finals. Croatia only joined FIFA in 1992, and they are a rising star. And at the 1998 World Cup in France, they finished third. 4 years ago at the World Cup in Russia, the Checkers went one step further and they reached the final, but they came second to France. But the Croatia squad has aged from 4 years ago, and it was not favored before the tournament, but they did well this time too, and they made it to the semifinals. They even sent home the #1 favorites Brazil in the quarterfinals. In the two most important knockout games, one against Japan and the other against Brazil, Croatia knocked out both opponents on penalty kicks. To date, Croatia has never lost in a penalty shootout in the World Cup. This makes them the kings of penalty kicks. The Argentine team, led by Lionel Messi, is one of the 3 favorite teams to win this year's World Cup. It might also be the last World Cup in 35-year-old Lionel Messi's career. In the history of the World Cup, Argentina has won twice, and they have finished as runner-up 3 times. Currently, Argentina are 3rd in the world and Croatia are 12th in the world. The two teams have met 5 times before with a record of 2 wins and 1 draw for each team. But to the delight of the Argentina fans, this game ended with no uncertainty. Next, if France beats Morocco today as expected, then the final will be between France and Argentina on Sunday, and Croatia will play for 3rd place on Saturday against either Morocco or France, depending on who loses the game between France and Morocco today. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Every like, comment, and share helps more people to see the truth. We've heard from many of our viewers that they don't get notifications of our videos anymore from YouTube. So please follow us on Telegram, Gab, Getter, and on True Social for the latest updates. Okay, this is our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard today, please don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends and family, because everybody deserves to know the truth. Again, thank you for watching Front Page, and we will see you next time.